Alright, so my name is Jason. I play guitar for On the Cinder, um, and that's honestly my only band. It has been for the last 10 years, and I'm just trying to stick with the one project and go strong. We're from Buffalo, New York. Uh, we met in college and sort of took it ever since. All right. So growing up, my main influences, I guess, the start of it was probably my older sister because she was old enough to buy CDs and I was about 7 or 8, so I used to just steal hers. And I think probably stealing her Green Day CD or copy of Dookie that was like partially scratched ended up ruining my life and taking me down the dark path of punk rock. um, I ran that CD ragged. My family bought me a cheap guitar at one point, and I learned to play that whole CD front to back and a bunch of others, and got into some bands in high school that were terrible, fucking terrible. And yeah, ever since now I'm here. What got me into punk music? Well, Green Day was the early influence. There was some cheeseball pop punk bands like Blink 182 in the mix. And then I discovered sort of that music could get heavier. Like the punk rock scene could go, and then I've discovered hardcore bands like Comeback Kid, Wilhelm Scream, Strike Anywhere. Then there were like balls to the wall, heavy and shredding guitars and stuff. And I really fell in love on that side of it. The other side of it was we had a big ska scene in Syracuse growing up, and just a giant place to release a bunch of energy, run around in the mosh pits, and it didn't really even matter what band was playing. We just wanted to go there and throw down. So between that, I sort of got a somewhat eclectic mix of punk rock, um, but I definitely gravitate toward the heavier stuff for sure. And then there's even some metal bands sprinkled in there that I like. But now I just put myself on the spot, and I'm not going to be able to name any. So we'll leave that to the imagination. But yeah, for sure. So I think my first real concert that I attended actually was what some people would probably call a punk show. It was maybe 14, and we went to see Motion City Soundtrack. It was great because my friend, who was my bass player at the time, was 16, so he had a car and he could drive us there. But he tried to get up in the pit and do some crowd surfing, and somebody dropped him on his head while he was too heavy. So he went out in an ambulance, and I just got stranded at the show. And my 14-year-old self had no idea what to do, so I just started begging strangers for rides home. Luckily, I found one to take me, though. It was great. But yeah, and it was otherwise a good time. Motion City Soundtrack was rad, and when I was 14, it was like magical, you know. All right. So some of my favorite shows I saw. One would have been the first time that I went to college, and I was alone on my own with my own bank account. So I went and bought tickets to see Sum 41 in Toronto. Actually, as cheesy as that makes me, I don't care. Guilty pleasure, as it were. But that was a great show. I saw some really cool Toronto bands. A band called Die Mannequin sticks out in my head, who opened the show, and they were really cool. Um, Another good, memorable one was Mike, our bass player's bachelor party. We drove down to Philly, and we saw Descendants at the Electric Factory, and he was so weepy and hammered and stoked, and it was nuts to butts packed. Just awesome. And afterward, we got drunk and ran up the Philadelphia Art Museum steps, the Rocky steps, and we got our phones out and played the Rocky music. Yeah, and then I think a personal favorite for our band was we had played Boston for a few years running, and we ended up jumping on just a good bill. It ended up being sold out, but not necessarily because of us. Uh, But for the first time, we had a couple people in the front watching us and actually singing along to our songs, and I was like, "Wow, somebody actually listens to our music!" And so that was a personal memory for me. That was good. So craziest things that's happened to you at a show. Some of the crazier things that I can recount off the top of my head. There's a place in Pennsylvania called the Skid Row Garage, and one thing they like to do is they like to light fireworks like bottle rockets and Roman candles and shoot them at the bands when they're playing, which can scare you if you've never played there before.
Haymaker.
Yeah, yeah, and so they had like little wheelie chairs, like office chairs, wheeling around the pit, and people pushing, and then skateboards coming through, and then fireworks, and a bottle rocket blasted me in the leg, and it scared the shit out of me. That was pretty crazy. Yeah, I think that among at least the things that come to mind right now, that's pretty up there. So we'll leave it at that. All right. Past and current bands. So when I first got a guitar in high school, I found a couple people to play with, and all of us were terrible, which was great because we thought we weren't terrible. At the moment, I don't think I could tell you the names of them because they were sort of all over the place, which would have been a better band name, All Over the Place, than any of our band names, I'm sure. Then I went off to college and I jumped in a band called Fleet Street for 4 or 5 years. We were like a ska band-ish, like a rock and roll, like if Foo Fighters put some horns behind them sort of thing. And that was cool because we always, everybody played at least 2 instruments, so not everybody had to show up to any gig, and most of the time we had like 1 or 2 people gone, so it'd be like, I just switched to drums, or somebody else would just switch to the keyboard. It's a weird assortment, but it was a lot of fun. And we always ended up doing weird gigs like bar mitzvahs and stuff. It was really strange. But yeah, and then up until that point, I just jumped in with, well, on the Cinder formed when we were in college, and we were all roommates before we started the band, and we just happened to be, all those two played in a band called the Stakeouts prior to that. But yeah, we were hanging out and jamming, and we wrote 7 songs and decided that was enough to go on tour with. It was a rough first tour, but yeah, that's my band timeline. Uh, what do I like most about being a musician? I love the creativity aspect, creating, writing, playing. Playing is probably the most fun when you get up in front of a good show, or even a decent show, or even a couple people who are enjoying the show. That's fine. It's a great time all the time. Uh, when you get kind of serious as a band, there's so much business, especially in like the DIY mentality of punk rock, that we do our own everything, booking, social media, finances, and all that stuff, and that becomes a grind. But specifically social media, to do like content, to be new and creative and make fun videos that people want to watch. I feel like it was just so much simpler in a time before the internet, but so that does get kind of grinding. But overall, it's a positive experience. Uh, what is your favorite food? So most of my friends would tell you that I have the culinary palate of a 5-year-old, and they would be correct. I think peanut butter and jam is my favorite food to this day, which is great because on tour it's a good thing to be able to make quick and dirty in the van. But it has to be grape jam, no jelly, no strawberry, no seeds. It's got to be grape jam, got to be creamy peanut butter, and if you really are fancy, use potato bread. Trust me, the recipe holds water. It is the greatest thing you've ever eaten, and like a nice 16-ounce glass of milk. That's the way to do it. Trust me. So what is my most useless talent? Probably There's an arcade game called Tapper that was like made in the 70s or 80s where he pours beers and slides them down the thing. I have the high score in Tapper in like 20 barcades around the country. And sometimes I'll walk up and ask them for a free beer because I got the high score, and it sometimes works.